Hi, this is Gil Gabori, the CEO of The House, and I'm here to answer some questions about the ACT and SAT. Usually we'd be doing this in person at your school, but because of the COVID pandemic, we're going to do this virtually. So the big question, one of the biggest questions is, what's the difference? Especially in Illinois, because the ACT has been the predominant test for a very long time, and that's actually true for the Midwest in general. The East Coast and the West Coast have been consistently using the SAT for 30 years. Now, a lot of parents like to relate to when we were kids and we took either of these tests. And I will tell you, if you are anywhere near my age, those tests have changed a few times. The ACT has actually changed much less, but the SAT has transformed itself several times, even over the last 10 years. So, to note the main difference, the ACT is scored through a 36. It has 4 sections. Through 36, I mean a high score of a 36. It has 4 sections: English, math, reading, and science reasoning, which is really more of a logic section, not a science section, and an optional writing section. The first 4 sections are also a maximum score of 36 each. They are averaged into your composite score, and the writing score stands as its own separate score, actually out of a much lower high score of 12. So the SAT is an interesting comparison in that SAT has a high score of 1600, as it did back in the day for us. At one point, it increased its maximum score to 2400, but has come back. And with the 1600 maximum score, they break it up between 3 sections, or 3 topics actually, which is math, verbal reasoning, and writing. Now, I don't want it to be confused. There is a writing section, which is part of the main part of the test. There is also an additional optional writing section, which you should think of more as an essay section. Now, the 2 tests, as far as verbal reasoning, are very comparable, except the SAT is a little less pressured on time. The ACT does like to rush our students through their sections. But the big difference with the SAT is that it weighs much more heavily on math. It has 2 math sections. One is actually without a calculator. It relies on the student doing the math entirely themselves. And so the test itself has more math, but also weighs the math more into its composite score. Their algorithm simply relies on the math score more heavily than the ACT. So when choosing which test to take, first of all, I always suggest take a diagnostic test. We offer free diagnostics, which are real SATs or ACTs under proctored conditions. But even if you don't use us, by which I should add, you get a very detailed report, and we are happy to give you our analysis, all of which is at no cost, and you can use that information however you want. But even if you don't come to us, you should take a preliminary ACT or SAT. I will let you know that there are some questionable strategies in the tutoring market in general, whether you take a written test by a company or a retired test by SAT and ACT. I highly recommend the second. It's not someone's compared engineering to an SAT or ACT, it is the actual test. So once you've taken those tests, you will have a sense of where your scores fall. But before you even take the time to do that, you can know a lot about your child, whether they are extremely strong in math, have they taken advanced courses in math, and whether working under a time constraint is extremely anxiety producing. Don't get me wrong, both tests are no fun. Both tests create a horrible snapshot of a student on one given Saturday or Sunday with a collection of multiple choice tests engineered by a collection of experts very far away. I have prepped, and the house has prepped students for decades, and will tell you, I hope and look forward to a day where we can assess students in a different way. But for now, this is what we have. So I want you to think about those things when deciding which test to put your child's time, effort, and your financial resources into preparing them for. Either way, I will recommend with both tests, you should plan on taking them multiple times. Every piece of data shows, whether you use test prep before the first test or between the first and second, then most students' scores go up the second time they take it. And over our experience is that most students plan to take it 3 times unless they reach an exceptional goal score. So that said, those are the main differences between those 2 tests, and choosing how you take them relies on those multiple factors. I always recommend talk to someone who's been dealing with this for a long time. Whether you have 1 child or 4, this is always a bit of a mystery, and these tests do change often. You can register for both tests at act.org or collegeboard.org for the ACT and SAT respectively. You should also be aware that during the COVID pandemic, sites have been closing at the last minute or in the last week related to how schools have been opening or closing. In the spring, this was a much more active endeavor. Now in the fall of 2020, what we're seeing is that some schools that are closed themselves for students are still allowing for the ACTs or SATs on the weekend. So you want to be aware when you register for the test, you want to stay in close touch with the school hosting the test, and you can always reach out to those 2 organizations about what specifically they're seeing. I do want to warn you though, we have had students show up on test day to find signs that say we've decided to close the site. So many times you might find out even before ACT and College Board do. That's just the world we're living in. If you have any questions, you can reach out to the house. Thank you.